All right, let's dive into one of the biggest philosophical showdowns in history, Plato versus his own student, Aristotle. We're talking about two of the greatest minds ever, locked in an epic search for the nature of ultimate reality.
So what's this all about? Well, the entire debate really boils down to one massive question. Both Plato and Aristotle were absolutely convinced there had to be a final explanation for everything. For them, it wasn't a question of if there was a final cause, but what it was.
Okay, so here's the setup. Both of these brilliant thinkers believed that some single, ultimate thing could explain our entire physical world. But, as you're about to see, the way they got there couldn't have been more different. It's the classic battle of top-down versus bottom-up thinking.
First up in the ring, Plato. His argument, to understand the world we see, you have to look beyond it. He imagined a higher, more perfect world that's basically the blueprint for everything we experience down here. So what was Plato's ultimate answer? He called it the form of the good. Now, try to think of it like this. Imagine a sun, but in a higher dimension. This sun isn't just a good thing, it is goodness itself. It shines its light on all the other perfect ideas, what he called forms, like perfect justice, perfect beauty, even the perfect idea of a circle. And by doing that, it creates the imperfect, shadowy copies that we see all around us in our world. So let's break that down. This form of the good is the absolute peak of reality. It's like the source code for the entire universe. But, and this is a huge but, you can't see it, you can't touch it, you can't measure it. Plato is adamant that the only way to grasp this ultimate truth was through pure, philosophical reason, completely unplugged from your messy physical senses.
Which brings us to our challenger. Plato's own student, Aristotle, looked at his teacher's theory and, well, he basically went in the complete opposite direction. He decided that instead of starting with abstract ideas in another dimension, he was going to start with the world right here in front of him. And that right there is the fundamental split between these two guys. For Aristotle, real knowledge doesn't come from some hidden, perfect realm. Nope, it starts with what you can actually see, what you can touch, and what you can study. You start with the evidence and you work your way up, not the other way around.
So to understand pretty much anything, Aristotle came up with his framework of the four causes. Let's take a statue, for example. The material cause is what it's made of, the bronze. The formal cause is its shape or design, the sculptor's big idea. The efficient cause is the thing that actually made it happen, the sculptor herself. And finally, the final cause, its ultimate purpose or telos, is to be a work of art. For Aristotle, everything has a purpose. Okay, so this leads to a pretty obvious question, right? If everything has a cause, and every cause has a cause, what caused the very first thing? Aristotle reasoned that if you follow that chain of dominoes all the way back, you have to, by pure logic, end up at something that started all the motion, but wasn't itself moved by anything else. That logical necessity, that's what he called the prime mover.
And you can see right away how different this is from Plato's idea. The prime mover is pure existence. It isn't changing or becoming anything. It just is. And here's the crucial part. While you can't see it directly, its existence is inferred from observing the world. It's a conclusion you reach because of the evidence, not in spite of it.
So, we have our two powerful concepts on the table, Plato's, which is born from pure reason, and Aristotle's, which is built from observation. Now, the analysis we're exploring today argues that one of these is just far more convincing than the other.
This table really lays out the core differences, doesn't it? For Plato, ultimate reality is transcendent. It exists outside our physical world. For Aristotle, it's immanent. You find it by looking within the universe. And that leads to the biggest split of all. Plato says truth comes from reason alone, while Aristotle says, no, you need both observation and reason.
And this gets us to the main critique of Plato's whole idea. The argument is that its very foundation is, well, pretty shaky. He never really gives a clear, solid proof for this entire other dimension of forms.
And look, this isn't just a modern hot take. Check out this quote from philosopher Julia Annis. Experts point out that Plato pretty much just asserts that the forms exist. He never really proves it. He's asking us to buy into a whole other reality without giving us a solid reason to.
Which makes you wonder, right? If an argument is based only on pure reason and completely rejects physical evidence, what's the real difference between a deep philosophical argument and just making stuff up? And this is where Aristotle's approach, grounded in evidence, really starts to look a lot stronger.
Okay, so let's put these ideas to the test. Let's see how they perform in a totally different arena, theology.
For centuries, thinkers have actually used these exact same concepts to build arguments for the existence of God, and it's a fascinating test case for both philosophies.
And what happens when you do this is pretty interesting. If you try to map God onto Plato's form of the good, you risk making God way too human, basically just a bigger, better version of us. But if you connect God to Aristotle's abstract prime mover, it forces you to deal with a being that is fundamentally different, completely other than us.
And you know, major thinkers like Thomas Aquinas really saw the power in Aristotle's concept. It just aligns so much better with theological traditions, like this famous passage from Isaiah that emphasized this huge, almost incomprehensible gap between the divine and the human. It keeps a sense of mystery that Plato's more familiar idea of good can kind of flatten out.
All right, let's bring it all home. After pitting pure reason against grounded observation, where do we land in this clash of titans? What's the final verdict? Well, based on this analysis, Aristotle's prime mover really pulls ahead, and here are the 4 big reasons why. First, it's rooted in the physical world we all actually experience. Second, its logic lines up surprisingly well with scientific ideas like the Big Bang, this idea of a necessary first cause. Third, it avoids making huge leaps of faith about unprovable realms. And finally, as we just saw, it turns out to be a much more useful tool in theology.
In the end, this ancient debate leaves us with a question that's just as massive today as it was more than 2,000 years ago. Do we find the deepest truths about our universe by looking inward, using the power of our own minds? Or do we have to start by looking outward, grounding every single idea in what we can observe? That right there is the essential legacy of the battle between Plato and Aristotle.